Hey guys, it's Celestia, and today's video might be the most embarrassing one I've ever made, because I'm gonna be roasting my old art for everyone to see. I mean, if you know where to look, I'm pretty sure you can actually find the majority of this yourself, so it was technically already there for everyone to see, but the gigantic verbal shit I'm about to take on it is definitely all new. That's a joke, for the record. I mean, that is pretty much what I'm about to do, but I don't actually mean to genuinely insult this old work, at least not in any malicious kind of way. Art is a journey, and no one starts out good at it. As a great man once said, you don't come out the pussy painting fucking Mozart. This video is just a fun way for me to have a good-hearted laugh at my old mistakes with art. And it's not meant to insult beginner artists either, so please don't take it that way. So let's start at the beginning with this traditional piece I did when I was 11 or 12. I distinctly remember being super proud of this one and showing it to my mom, which kind of makes me want to die inside, all considered. I think that pride probably had to do with my attempt to draw hands for once, rather than hiding them behind the character's back, which, yeah, let's start with the hands, because, oh my god, what are those? What are they? Especially this one, like that doesn't even look like a hand. Why is the wrist so pointy? Why is the thumb just one of 5 hand sausages? I am in actual physical pain. The fact that her right boob is a C cup while the left boob is an A cup is a close contender when it comes to things about this art that are emotionally destroying me. Although I'm pretty sure that's a result of my attempt to make her casually lean in a physically impossible way for whatever reason. I don't know anyone who just regularly stands with their body like that. And I just stood up and tried it, and I'm disappointed. And why is her left leg sticking out like that at the bottom? Had I not seen legs prior to this drawing? I don't know, maybe this was when I was drawing a lot of chibis with gigantic wide legs that didn't taper off at the foot or something, but yeah. Aside from that, we can also see that this was during my ridiculously pointy face phase, given that the chin is a triangle and her cheek sticks out with the same kind of angle as her hair. The buttons on her vest are also off-center, which is a small, nitpicky thing to criticize in the face of all this. But still. Moving on, this is another traditional piece that I did around the same time period, which, in fairness, I do hate less than the first one. Also, in fairness, that's only because the tree and the general composition are vaguely redeemable qualities, and I like that I made the kimono match the leaves. That said, I'm just gonna zoom in here, and I don't know where to begin. What do you guys think the most striking thing here is? The fact that her boobs are somehow connected to her collarbone, or the fact that the anatomy of her arm and torso have the structural integrity of 2 overcooked spaghetti noodles? Like, let me just draw over what her body is apparently supposed to be like under the kimono so that we can just appreciate Noodle Woman in all of her anatomically offensive glory. Also, her knee. It's so sharp that it could probably function as a weapon. And if you look closely, you'll see that rather than folding under her thigh and having her calf outside of the kimono, as it realistically would, her bent leg actually goes right back into the kimono, which would require her to acrobatically fold it into it after sitting down. All of this goes to say that I did not even vaguely want to draw the rest of the leg that would be visible with a dress that length, which a kimono wouldn't even be anyway, so I decided to hide it in a particularly odd way and hope no one would notice, I guess. Now, you might remember this next piece from a previous video in which I may or may not have used it as an example of exceptionally bad digital art. And not only do I stand by that assertion, this is actually my favorite piece of old art that I have, because of just how much is wrong with it. It's like the longer you look at it, the more horrifying intricacies you begin to notice, like a Where's Waldo of art mistakes. So we're gonna go through it character by character, because this piece is a goddamn treasure trove of painful levels of cringe. So here we have Konata, who inexplicably has both hands hidden for no better reason than I guess I didn't want to draw them. And they're hidden so naturally too, because who doesn't sit with one hand presumably on their ass, while the other hand hangs limply at the end of an arm that evidently doesn't contain any bones. Other highlights include the return of the pointy knees, which are actually more alarming here because they're literally right beside a pair of normal knees. So clearly I knew how to draw knees by this point, and yet these monstrosities made their way through anyway. I almost respect their persistence, honestly. Next, we have Kagami, and while she has the least problems of the 4, the arm that's around Konata is so unbelievably mangled and physically impossible that it warrants its own call-out. How is it so long? Where does it go? How is it so long? It hurts me. The longer I look at it, the more it hurts me. And I mean, obviously we have to give an honorable mention to the feet, but let's be honest, every single foot in this image is an eldritch abomination. So I don't want to call out Kagami's unfairly. Finally, we have her wrist, which, I don't know. Let's give it the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she just has a really severe case of carpal tunnel and it's supposed to be swollen at the top before gradually tapering down into the forearm. And maybe her forearm is supposed to be disproportionately larger than her entire upper arm. Either way, I can't keep looking at it without Tsukasa's arm stealing its thunder, so let's talk about it. Unnaturally long, noodly, lizard person arms are apparently a theme of this piece because while Tsukasa's isn't quite as alarmingly stretched out, it does come with its own unique, beautiful centerpiece, which is the complete and utter lack of a shoulder. Her arm is literally a noodle, which apparently curves perfectly and directly out of her neck, which is made doubly concerning by the fact that her other arm does have a shoulder. So what happened to her? Who hurt you, Tsukasa? And while we're at it, we have to give a specific shout out to the mangled hand that hurts me to acknowledge, and the fact that if you zoom in on her thighs, you'll notice based on the color of the space between them, that her ass and legs are actually separate from her torso. That's right, that color is sand. The space between her thighs is empty, goes right through. I can't even begin to imagine how bad my understanding of anatomy could have been to justify ever believing that a human body could allow for an empty space where that is. But it happened, and now you all have to fucking look at it. Finally, let's look at Miyuki. First, let's take a look at her boobs, because as my partner so eloquently put it, the fact that the crease between them inexplicably stops halfway through, it makes them appear to have melded together to form one large, impressive super boob that just happens to have a crease in the middle. She also happens to have a boneless noodle arm that's presumably just touching her own butt in order for the hand to be hidden. And while she has one normal knee, she also has one square. Before we move on from this timeless, ageless masterpiece, let's also mention the wonky-ass line art. The fact that none of them have noses, although in fairness that is typical of the Lucky Star style. The composition of the piece in which the focus isn't actually even on the girls. The complete lack of line art in the background despite the characters having line art. And the fact that I blatantly just used a water texture, a sand texture, and cloud textures for the background and called it done. Finally, the cherry on top is that this piece inexplicably has a transparent background. But I never colored in the white parts of this piece because I presumably didn't know it had a transparent background and just left those parts blank because I thought the background was white. So this piece is even more fun to look at when it's overlaid on things because you can see how it ties it all together as one beautiful, horrifying disaster that should never have been allowed to exist. Anyway, finally moving on to the next piece, let's examine this one closely. Obviously, it should be mentioned that I stole the background from Google and tried to paint over the stair part to bring it together with the character, which did not work at all. But at least I shamelessly admitted that on my DeviantArt with one of those U-face emojis. But by far my favorite part of this piece is the anatomy. If you look closely at his legs, you'll see that while one leg is correctly attached to his body as it should be, the other leg appears to just be attached to the side of his hip. Let me draw you a quick diagram of how this poor man's body has to look, so that we can truly appreciate the suffering he must endure. Now let's take a look at this Ichigo fan art here next. As you can see, by this point my anatomy is at least slightly improving, and in all honesty, this is a piece I might end up redrawing at some point, in large part just because I really love Tokyo Mew Mew. But that said, there's still a great deal to roast here, starting with the gigantic eyes with their misshapen irises, the over-blended hair highlights, the fact that the colors in the background are so overwhelming and identical to Ichigo's own that she basically blends into it, the return of the dangerously sharp chin, the fact that her choker somehow actually just goes into the skin of her neck rather than around it, and finally, this foot. Looking closely at this foot, one may notice that it is both backwards and on top of the leg that it's supposed to be behind. Once again, let me take a moment to draw you guys a diagram of what her foot must have to be doing underneath that boot. Yeah. Okay, let's put the boot back on. I don't want to make you guys look at that for too long. For this next piece, I distinctly remember being really proud of it at the time, which was probably in large part because of the eyes. I remember that I'd tried something new with them, and in fairness, compared to Ichigo's, they're a huge improvement, and I still like them. That said, adequate eyes are not enough to detract from her X-Acto knife chin, or the fact that her head is the size of her torso, or, most glaringly, the fact that her arms disappear into the void. Where do they go? It's like they hit her thigh and enter enter a pocket dimension. Obviously, this was another attempt to avoid drawing hands, but oh my god, how did I not see this? How could I let this happen? Okay, you know what? Next piece, because it makes me sad. This was one of my first pieces with a full group of characters and a background since the Lucky Star beach trip that we don't talk about. And if nothing else, it's better than that. It's not good, but it's better than that, although that is a pretty low bar. First though, I'd just like to address the perspective. It perplexes me. My first thought was that me on here was just closest and most in focus, while everyone else got progressively farther away. But the problem here is that I can't tell if that's true, because other than Shion, that's actually the natural height progression of the characters. I don't even know which option I hope was true, because the perspective is all wrong if it's supposed to be them lined up like that. And if it was just supposed to be a decline of their heights, putting them all in front of each other the way that I did makes it look like it's a matter of perspective anyway, so it just doesn't work no matter how you look at it. Also, I'd just like to point out that if you look closely, you'll see that I very clearly drew the background after the characters rather than drawing it first and erasing where the characters ended up, because based on the negative space between the girls, you'll see that I really only drew the background in the top left corner. Everything else is just various shades of brown, because I could apparently just not be bothered to add those minuscule amounts of vaguely detailed background. Finally, some other things that make me want to crawl inside my own body and hide there just to be able to stop looking at this image. None of their heads are aligned with their bodies, but are instead way off to the side in a consistent manner that suggests that not only do they all have very severe scoliosis, but their spines are all deformed in the exact same way. Also, Satoko's gigantic thumbs up in the middle of her face for some reason is just, chef's kiss, as is Shion's deliberately hidden square hand, and the fact that all of their mouths are pretty much directly on top of their chins. If nothing else, they have rounded chins. We just have to thank God that they have rounded chins. You can also see that at this point in my art style journey, I started experimenting with thickening line weight in places of shadow and where lines meet, which I bring up simply because moving on to the next piece, you'll see just how far I ended up going with that. Yeah. As you can see, the answer is too fucking far. What was I doing with these lines? Was this supposed to be shading at this point? It was never supposed to be when I started. It certainly shouldn't be. What happened to me? Anyway, we should also note that Elle's hair here is so much bigger than it has any right to be. And there's also this one inexplicable little tuft here that seems detached from the greater Borg that is the rest of his hair, and it bugs me. The hands are also not good. And based on the corner of his jaw, you can see that I've deteriorated back into sharp faces. See, that was my problem back then. I would draw a lot and then not draw for like a year. So any improvement that I'd made in the Higurashi piece we just saw went out the window when I came back from that hiatus with this one. Not that that one was good, but at least I'd grown out of facial structures that were structurally similar to broken shards of glass. Finally, my favorite part, there's no tea in his teacup. He's drinking air. And the last piece we'll look at here is one that I fondly remember because I had to redraw it 5 times from scratch. See, when I was in my young teens, I used to hang out at my best friend's place a lot, and because I loved art and wanted to be able to draw digitally at our sleepovers, I would bring my laptop and tablet. This was one such piece that I was working on while at her place overnight, and this would not have been a problem if not for the fact that despite having already lost all progress on the piece once because a system update restarted my laptop without my permission when I'd gone to the bathroom, I still didn't have the good sense to save regularly. My memory blanked constantly. I also didn't update my PC regularly and just kept hitting that restart in 4 hours button when it gave me those stupid prompts, which meant that half the time, my laptop was anywhere from 10 minutes to 4 hours away from restarting instantly without my knowledge. So every time I got distracted from my work by something my best friend and I were doing, which was usually going for walks and getting Slurpees, I would forget to save, and it would restart, and my progress would be lost again. And I never learned because I was constantly distracted. Then I finally managed to finish it, celebrated by going out to get a treat from the store with her, and came back to see that my laptop had died and I had forgotten to save. So long story vaguely shorter than it could have been, this piece is actually the result of 5 redraws. So originally it was probably much, much worse. As it is, I can still stand this one, despite the fact that it's from a decade ago. Aside from the fact that her torso is so unbelievably long that she has to have like 80 vertebrae, and whatever the ever-loving fuck she's doing with her hands. The shading and highlights are way too blurred, the shirt folds look like several worms, the shirt is longer on one side, and the skirt folds just, they don't work like that. but if nothing else, I do like the eyes. Anyway, thank you for witnessing this nightmare tour of my old work, and I hope you had as much fun as I did. Honestly, I wouldn't be the artist I am today if I hadn't had all of these pieces as stepping stones to get here, and while it's fun to make fun of them, I do recognize that they're all a part of growing as an artist, and I can genuinely appreciate them for what they represent when it comes to that. If I may leave you with one vaguely constructive thought, it's this: don't delete your old art when you start getting embarrassed by it. I did that, and that's why this handful of pieces is all I really have left of the beginnings of my art journey, despite there having once been so much more that I would have loved to have been able to make fun of with you guys today. It may make you cringe, and you may not want anyone to ever see it and associate it with you, but someday you're gonna want to have it so you can look back on it with amused fondness, and it sucks to know that it's pretty much lost forever. So even if you take it off your social media and hide it away in the depths of your computer's files, keep your old art. It has value, even if you may not see it at the time. Finally, big thank you as always to channel members Cafe Soleil, Lotus Streams Art, and Joseph Solomon for supporting me and my channel, and thank you to all of you watching. This has been a really fun video for me to make, and I hope you guys enjoyed it too. Thanks for watching, please leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video.